So I knew two things from that. This was, I had just turned 5 and I was going to school in August, and this was the summer. And I just listened every day and asked those questions. And I knew two things. One was that the purpose of my life would be, if I chose to be the best person I could be. And the second purpose would be to serve any way I could. I had no idea. Oh, and I learned, and this was the other thing. I knew that I was meant to learn when this voice, I call it the voice, said, you're meant to learn. And I was like, okay, if I'm meant to learn, then I want to learn to be the best I can be. What am I meant to learn? And I heard the word compassion.
Guys, Katherine, thank you so much for joining me. You have a master's and a doctorate, I believe, in spiritual science. So I'm quite interested to hear about what led you to getting that and what it actually entails.
Right. So when I sort of started in the world, moved into the world, it was really obvious to me I was 5. And I understood the transition from being at home and comfy, and I started asking inwardly, what am I going to do out there? I don't want to go to school. I was really clear about that. And I've got to go, I don't see any way I can get out of it. What am I going to do in the world? What's it for? What does it mean? Why? What am I going to do out there? And I just had these questions every day, and I made it every day. And at 5, somehow knew how to listen. So I knew two things from that. This was, I had just turned 5 and I was going to school in August, and this was the summer. And I just listened every day and asked those questions. And I knew two things. One was that the purpose of my life would be, if I chose to be the best person I could be. And the second purpose would be to serve any way I could. I had no idea. Oh, and I learned, and this was the other thing. I knew that I was meant to learn when this voice, I call it the voice, said, you're meant to learn. And I was like, okay, if I'm meant to learn, then I want to learn to be the best I can be. What am I meant to learn? And I heard the word compassion. But I didn't know what that meant. I was 5 years old, and I asked my mom, and she kind of looked at me like, compassion? And she didn't really have an answer, but I never forgot that. So as soon as I could read in 2nd grade, I got this big, huge dictionary. It was in these bookshelves in the living room where we were never meant to go as kids. Don't go to the living room because it's supposed to be perfect. But I snuck in the living room, got this book out, and looked that up. But I still didn't know what it meant. So this is a long way around to say why I got my master's and doctorate in spiritual science, which was many years later. That was just a way that I found in the world through Peace Theological Seminary and College of Philosophy to keep the journey going of being the best person, learning compassion, and through learning how to be a spiritual scientist, how to share that with others if they asked. That was important.
Wow. So it's actually interesting because the medical medium, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he says that the spirit of compassion speaks through him. And it's loud and clear. That was the word. That's the name of the spirit.
It's beautiful.
So,
wow.
Yes. So tell me, what is spiritual science?
It's approaching spirit, whatever that word means to you. And it means so many different things to so many different people, right? Holy Spirit, or the Great Spirit, or the spirit of love, or the spirit of compassion, or whatever it means to you. How do you scientifically look at, meaning you have a hypothesis and then you practice methods to get benefits. How do you go about awakening, unfolding, expanding the spirit within, without? And you approach that in that scientific method. So you have something that can be so ephemeral, right? And ineffable, the spirit, whatever that word connotes to you. But working on this physical plane, then you have an approach that you can actually utilize in a very practical way to deepen that connection with spirit. And every person is going to be different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting that at 5 you already knew that you're not like the average person. How did you find you got along with others when you spoke about things like that? Because I think
Mm.
like more and more people are waking up now, but those days it wasn't like that.
That's so interesting because, of course, at 5, I didn't know I wasn't the average person.
True? Yeah.
I mean, I thought everybody was looking at life this way and looking for meaning. And I thought the other thing that happened that summer was um, my family would go to, in the United States, there's woods. We call it the North Woods. It's in Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, and it's wilderness with lakes and wilderness. So my family would go to this wilderness lake. And also at 5, it was the first time my parents, which nobody would do now, I don't think, let a 5-year-old go walking in the woods by themselves. But I want to go. Can I go by myself into the woods? They finally said yes. So I went into the woods, and I remember looking up. First, I knew that if you're really quiet in the woods, the birds, when you walk in, will just alert each other and they get really noisy. But I knew if you get really quiet, they start to get used to you and calm down, and you get to be with them in a really peaceful way. So I did that and I got really quiet. And then the birds just instead of their warning. And I waited for that moment. And then I remember looking up through the canopy of trees and going, this isn't real. This doesn't look real. What is this? And I thought about, I'd seen plays or I'd been to the movies as a little kid. And I felt like, and in our movie theater in our little town, it still had the curtains I come across. And I
Yeah.
felt like I want to pull the curtains off. What's behind these curtains? The canopy of trees, the clouds, the sun, the sound of the birds. What's behind all that? There's got to be something behind all that. And I looked up and I thought, well, the stars are there. There's stars. And then the daylight kind of melted away and I saw the stars. And then I thought, the stars, I could hear the stars. And the stars were singing to each other.
Oh,
So with the bird sound also at the same time. So I understood there was a physical level, but also this level that was sort of always present, that had this very beautiful song that was always going, but you had to get quiet and listen really deeply and kind of put yourself aside. I mean, I just put myself aside as that little kid. How did we get off on that? How did I get off on that? What were we talking about that I lost my train of thought? Um,
saying
oh,
you were aware at such a young age already and how different it was. But you carry on. That was amazing.
so I thought everybody saw that. That
Yeah.
was your question. How did you kind of fit in with everybody? I thought everybody saw that. And everybody was aware that, like, this, we're here, but it's not real, not really real. Um, I when I figured out that no other people didn't see that, um, I quit talking about it. I got really
Yeah.
quiet as a little one. Yeah, as a little girl. I got really quiet, except for other oh, I had a friend that could see like this also, or was aware like this. And we had these long conversations. So I learned to kind of pick and choose where the conversations would go or what, we would talk about the colors around people and past lives. And
Wow.
so found people like that. But the sound, and then people found me like that. The sound, which I learned later in life through teachers of the sound current, the celestial melodies, the nod in Indian, the nada yoga, and I learned that sound. I learned about that sound more as I got older.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just going back quickly, I think a lot of children before the age of 7, the veil hasn't really lifted. So they have what we as adults call imaginary friends, which may not even be imaginary. And it's such a pity that people say, "Oh, stop it, you know, get with it." That's not real, and it is a pity. And I think maybe a lot more would have maybe remembered, but then they just forget. Yeah. Okay, so you do Nada yoga now?
So nada yoga, yes, with the yoga of the sound. So for those of your listeners that don't know, it's not a physical yoga. It's a yoga of sound. And you can practice in classical Indian music. There's what's called the sargam. These are sounds, seed sounds, and the sounds sa re ga ma pa da ni sa from those are just some. The Sufis have the sound of hue. Um, I like to practice the Anai hue. Anai means empathy or compassion. And then hue is, some people love the Om. I love the hue. Whatever, here we can be the spiritual scientist and look and see what resonates for you, but to practice it to kind of open your spiritual ears. You don't necessarily hear these sounds physically, but you can feel their rhythm. You can, some people hear, some people just have an impression, but the sound of what creates the universe is always ringing. It's always singing. It's what I heard as a 5-year-old. And it's a way to practice transcending this physical body life and reaching into those levels of soul, of spirit, of whatever you care to call it, and then expanding your consciousness to take it all in or to lead you to magnificence, really, bliss, ecstasy, to the wisdom that can help your everyday life. So there's a transcendence, but there's also a very of practicality. And that's why I like your spiritual warrior journey, because I think that truly is the journey of the spiritual warrior, is to find the spirit. Oh, now I'm getting goosebumps. I always love that when that happens. Find the spirit and then live it in everyday life in that
Yeah.
just approach of I studied with somebody who I think was the greatest spiritual warrior that I'd ever met. His name was John Roger, and he's a sound current. He wouldn't have said this. He's passed away now, but sound current master. Um, and he wrote a book called The Spiritual Warrior. So I was very influenced by that. Yeah. So the teachers came to me then. And I think that's the magic and that happens in life when you open yourself up and go, okay, what's next? I just want to be the best I can be. I don't know what that looks like or what that is, but that's my intention. So I lived on this ranch up in the mountains of Colorado in the US, and I lived in the barn. I had this little tiny 2-room place without water. It was very remote, but there was a big ranch house, and in there moved in a great Sufi teacher named Rashad Field. Some of your listeners may have heard of him. Um, then he moved, and he had these students that really revered him, but I didn't know who. I was in college studying science. I didn't know who he was, so I never revered him. So he would talk to me, right? So he would talk to me, and it turned out he was traveled the world and was quite an adept. But I got this real personal experience, and he would just laugh at me, and he'd be like, "You're so independent." I'd be going out in the woods to camp, um, and then they moved out, and then some Lakota, which some people call Sioux, people moved in, and there was a famous medicine man named John Fire Lame Deer. He wrote Lame Deer's Secret of Visions, and he was dying in a hospital in Denver, in the Veterans Hospital, and his son, who's also a medicine man, Archie Fire Lame Deer, came, and so I got to have all these ceremonies with them. They would invite me just because I was on the property. Um, and it was all in Lakota, none of it was in English. And I would just go in these sweat lodges and come out like, what just happened? Feel like a different person. I don't know anything about what just happened. And they just pass you this pipe and just so these experiences kind of came to me without me consciously looking for them.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's quite a wide variety. So, what did you learn from them?
They were all, well, love, really. It all comes down to that. Just what the loving heart is
Yeah,
and the physical life within that field of loving, field of grace, field of peace, field of caring for others, caring for yourself,
yeah,
field of just wanting what's best for yourself, for others. No matter
yeah,
what the tradition, it just, that's always at the tradition's core,
yeah.
in my
Well,
experience.
yeah. I've spoken to so many people, and their central message is love. But
Mm.
I think people get confused between what's real unconditional love versus human love. It's that um, I'm in love with somebody, or if I love myself, then I'm being selfish. If that's a narcissistic trait, can't do that. I can only love other people and care for them, but I can't love myself. What would you
Mm.
say to those people?
I'd say practice love, practice the spirit of love. It's not like you have to have an intellect, you don't need to know how to love, but if you're in the field of love by practicing that, it will embody you. You will embody it. So
Yeah,
not as an intellectual process, but as a beautiful, energetic going into the field of love or the field of spirit, which is the field of love.
yeah. So, what would you want people to know about meditating, Nada yoga, spiritual science? What is it that they need to know?
So I think one of the best ways to keep ourselves, oneself, in an uplifting track, because let's face it, the world is designed to seduce us into negativity. It just it just is we challenges us that way, which is the good news. Because if we can overcome the news cycle, the worry of war, the traffic, whatever it is that disturbs you, if you can learn to rise above that and stay in that field of loving, of spirit, compassion, then you've won. You've won you've graduated. You've graduated this school here. How I've learned to do that is by consciously practicing what I've learned as a spiritual scientist that connects my beingness with what is transcendent, with my soul, with the greater soul, with loving, with compassion. So making it a daily practice is, and it can be very simple, but making whatever connects you to your spirit, your loving, your soul, as a daily conscious practice really starts to make a groove, kind of like grooves you in the right direction of staying on track. And you get stronger, way stronger. So
Yeah.
that when the slings and arrows, or we can get metaphysical and say your karma comes up, you've got an oasis to go to. You've developed it, you've deepened it. And these spiritual practices it could be walking your dog. Oh, that brings me peace. It can be
Yeah.
sitting quietly and practicing nada yoga, a sound, one of the ancient mantras that has a vibrational frequency if you want to get metaphysical and new agey about it, which I do. So you practice a sound. I like to practice the hue or a nigh hue, as I said. Some people love the om, but there's so many sounds and you can play with them and see what goes, and that may change too. You might do the om for 5 months and then move to the whatever. It's fine. You don't have to do the same one for the rest of your life. Or just say the word God or say the word love. And you'll start to build that frequency because each sound, even the word love, has a vibrational frequency. Now, as you build that, right, then you start to embody that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like Emoto's the photographs that he took of water and how the crystals change shape according to the words that we use. And I mean, often I see, especially women, when they look in the mirror, they don't see a beautiful body; they see everything there is to hate. And if your body is 90% water, and you're looking at your body saying how disgusting you are or how fat you look or whatever, what are you doing? What are you doing to yourself? What if instead you could be grateful to your body for showing you or helping you to get through the day or to live this life and taste different things and have sensations? It's so hard to keep that in mind, I think, and especially for women. And I suppose the social media and all that doesn't help much. Yeah,
Well,
it's
that's
become
really
very
important.
outward. Yeah,
Yeah, it's really, really important because that level of emotional and mental mastery is really one of the biggest parts of being a spiritual warrior, being a spiritual scientist,
yeah,
and being vigilant. Because also you can, walk by an advertisement and all of a sudden your mind is saying the words on it and you just didn't even notice that.
yeah.
Or
You know,
the judgment, and then the judgment is the number one thing that gets in the way of ourselves and relationships and spirit, by whatever word you want to call that, and our own true self. And then the world seduces us into that because we have these images to look up to, or, and it
yeah,
just, yeah. So learning to master that, I would add as a spiritual practice. And I would add, and I do, and I suggest to people, find words that are mantras so that if you go down that hole there, like, I'm getting, my mind lately is, I don't recognize myself. I'm getting old. What happened? Got all these lines. And I'm like, stop. I tell myself, stop. Some people don't, that doesn't work for them, but it works for me. So you got to figure out what works for you. But I'll say, stop. What is real? Oh, I'm a really nice person. I'm really sweet. And it's got to be real because I know that about myself. It's got to be real. You can fake it till you make it with affirmations. Um, but I think it's more powerful and stronger to really go to what you really know that's good about yourself. And then just repeat that
Yeah.
until that negative voice or the negative feeling, the negative feelings, then they whip into the unconscious, subconscious. And that's when it gets really tricky because that you don't hear that. You don't feel that. It's right below the level of consciousness. But if you keep telling yourself these negative patterns, like you were talking about, they kind of seep in to that place that we can't find necessarily. So it takes some work to unravel that, but it totally can be unraveled completely.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when you're in it, you can't see it. It's only when you step back, you're able to see, is that how I was thinking? Is that what I was, is those the thoughts that I was using? Is that the emotions I was having? Yeah. And you're right
Yes.
about the judgment. I think, because what's also been coming up a lot with a lot of the people I've been interviewing is forgiveness
Yes.
and forgiving yourself too for making mistakes, for having, chosen the wrong partner or for having done something that you feel bad about. Instead of beating yourself up over it, see it as a life experience. Either way, you're learning something. I think that forgiveness is part of the compassion too, I suppose. Yeah.
Biggest part of compassion. Absolutely. And we forgive ourselves for the judgment. Okay, so that's a little subtle difference. But let's say I don't know. So let's say I was grouchy in the grocery store, checking out, and I was impatient. There was a big long line, and I was impatient, and I got grouchy. And let's say, I said some snarky thing to somebody. I'm sure I've done that. I'm making this up though in the moment. And then I walk out and I go, wow, I can't believe I just did that. There was no call for that. What? Okay. What I'm forgiving is not the action. I'm forgiving that I judged myself for it. So forgive myself for judging that I was snarky and that I'm not very nice sometimes. So the behavior is way different than the judgment. So the deeper way to release yourself is to forgive the judgment on yourself rather than the behavior. You may not like the behavior, and that person, whoever, I just snarked at, certainly didn't like it. It wasn't very nice to them. But where it gets in our consciousness is when we judge our own behaviors. It's a subtle difference, but it's huge difference. I had a
Absolutely.
Yeah, I had a really hard time with forgiving myself, that word. So the way I also work with that is so I kind of flip the word. I go, I'm giving forward the loving. So if I'm like, oh, I can't believe I just did that. Oh, no, and I tell myself, give forward the loving, give forward. And then it just flips. So the word forgiveness doesn't work for me. I've tried it, but giving forward, I can do that. I know how to do that. I can go, you're okay. You're okay. And then
Yeah.
that is the opposite of forgiveness, which is acceptance. And that's what we're really after, right? The forgiveness is a trip.
Yep.
The thing we did that we judge, we just tripped up. But I'm getting goosebumps again. I love that. But the acceptance is where that field of energy just comes in and makes you bigger, way bigger, bigger than we ever even know. We can get so big, like the edges of our consciousness, so expansive. Then we move into this oneness, and it's just ecstasy and bliss. And the beginning seed of that, I think, is an acceptance. This teacher I had, John Roger, he called it the first law of spirit. So it's one thing to have it intellectually, but then when you move into that field, and sometimes it starts with the trip up,
Yeah.
and that's okay, because then we can be grateful for that. Oh, I tripped up. I got to forgive the judgment. Okay, I forgive myself for judging myself. I'm giving forward into the loving. There it is. Now I'm accepting. I'm accepting that everything, I'm just accepting everything is fine. There it is. Then you go into the oneness. And I think that's really what we're all here for, that experience of being so connected and loving.
Yeah. Yeah. I often think the intention behind it is what you need to look at. If your intention wasn't to harm anybody, then what do you need to forgive really? Then you made a mistake and that's okay. You can let it go. But if your intention was to harm someone, that would be something else. That would be,
That would be mental illness.
well, some people feel maybe, not, yeah, well, there are people that I call them narcissists
Oh,
that intentionally will, belittle somebody or say something harmful to make the other person feel bad so they feel better. And you can forgive those people for feeling so bad about themselves that they need to make somebody else feel bad about themselves. But at the end of the day, if you keep allowing them in your space, that could be harmful to yourself. But anyway, that's going down another topic. I don't want to talk about narcissism. I'm actually loving what you're sharing now. So if you are um, if you were able to see those things as a child, as a 5-year-old, and see the sky beyond there, has that evolved? Has it become part of your life, or have you experienced other things as well now?
oh, many, many, many other things. I mean, I can't even, and there's mountains and valleys. There are times when I've been so caught up in the world, in career, or taking care of family, or that I haven't been able. I haven't given myself, I take that back. I haven't given myself the space to explore the inner realms. And then there are times when I've had in life, in kind of a going on a long life now, um, times where I've had times where I can really just deepen and delve into that. And it's cyclical.
Yeah,
So um I the inner worlds, the spiritual realms, I'll call them, that you can access through a spiritual practice, a mantra practice, whatever that practice is, a meditation practice really is, it's infinite, it's vast.
yeah,
In my house, there are many mansions, it says in some part of the Bible, but that's in the spiritual realms, there's infinite, it's infinite.
yeah,
Um, and you can travel it. You can travel it. I spent a lot of years, 25 years, I spent so disciplined in writing down my inner experiences as I traveled the inner spiritual realms so that I would be able to know the spiritual topography and know where I was because it's so vast. I think it's important when you're in meditation, and if you consciously and intentionally want to travel the levels of consciousness. And then I would suggest to people, we have lots of levels of consciousness that are here in the physical. So physical, astral, mental, emotional, imaginational, causal. And then in metaphysics, there's kind of a ceiling in a way. And we can move through that ceiling into the soul realms. And it's said in metaphysical circles, there's 27 realms above the 7 realms here on the physical. And those 27, these are accessible. This is what yogis have done Buddhists have done for thousands of years, and esoteric Christians, and some of the esoteric Hebrew traditions as well. And some people are just gifted; they're just already there. So I spent about 25 years going into meditation and writing down the experiences. I think it took me about 10 years to really get a greater ability to know where I was in the spiritual realms and bring that information back in a way that I could understand it, because we don't have reference points. We're in the physical. This body's physical and it's
Yeah.
spiritual. But if we bring it down to our mind, we don't have reference points. So it's a really good spiritual practice, daily practice, to write down your experiences. Even if you think you're making them up, doesn't matter. Just write them down. Eventually, you're going to understand that you aren't.
I think that's amazing. So, have you put a book together for that? Is
Ah,
there, have you written out what the realms are?
well, the realms are taught in many, many traditions. The realms are, this is not new information.
No, but for you, for yourself, like have you said, okay, this is where I am now. This is the feeling that I'm getting here.
Yes,
Um,
I can pretty much distinguish the different realms. And with the teacher that I worked with, John Roger, he taught soul transcendence. So he taught going through the realms and then going into the soul realms. And now that's just the most interesting place to be. Um, but yes, and there are different sounds with the realms. There's different colors. There's ways to identify where you are. It's good to have a inner teacher that can, because the realms are so vast, and you can ask whatever great master you love, Jesus, Buddha, um, Zoroaster. I mean, and you can ask them inwardly to be your guide, to be your path, like a scout, that kind of a guide. I don't mean like in the psychic realm a guide. I mean like, just walk with me on this path because I don't
yeah,
want to get lost. Just take my hand. And ask that it comes from the very highest authority in the spiritual realms, and then
yeah,
you'll have that.
yeah. I think that's a great idea. But also, you say you've been using a certain word. Um, would that be like transcendental meditation? They give you a word to say, and you would just focus on that word in order to kind of focus your mind and keep it still, or is it to use the word to bring out the word essence more? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I do
Like
know. I
some
know.
words have no meaning. In transcendental meditation, it has no meaning, so that your mind can go quiet versus having a meaning, like you say, or something that actually instills a feeling into you.
Instills, I would call it a field of energy, a vibrational frequency,
Yeah.
harmonic frequency. Uh, you can use anybody can use any word that brings them the most beautiful field of energy. Um, Many, many traditions have mantras, and a teacher will give you an initiation and will give you a different mantra for that level of consciousness. And
Yeah.
it's almost like a light in a tunnel. That mantra is like, here's the vibrational frequency, and you just go towards it, right? And then kind of carve through your karma on that level by practicing that field of energy, that mantra. Some people think that you have to quiet your mind. I don't think so. I think that is not a helpful way to practice meditation, because the mind, you get, then it's like, I'm going to quiet my mind, and then my mind goes crazy. But if you, right,
Yeah.
like I'm telling it,
Exactly.
be quiet, and it's like, blah, 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 blah. Now it's become a monkey mind, and it's driving me absolutely crazy. I don't do that. And in the different teachers I've had, they don't teach that. Um, I have studied Buddhist meditation that's way different. I would rather, and I found it more effective, is to take a high vibrational sound, let my mind roll with it, let that energy, let myself come like a tuning fork in tune with that energy. So I become in tune with that. Let's just say I say the word God, the highest word I could think of, or I don't know, holiness, whatever. And I say it, my mind then has something to do. That's why you do a mantra.
Yeah.
And it will quiet down, but you don't have to try. It just will because you've given it something to focus on. And then the vehicles, the spiritual vehicles, your soul body, let's say, then that can go and travel the spiritual realms. So you got your
Yeah,
mind
that's
over here,
yeah,
right?
that's
Mind's
right.
over here. It's not going with you. It's not of those realms. The mind is not of those realms. It's not going with you. A lot of people try to take it. It won't work. It'll keep you on the lower physical realms of consciousness. So you go, here you go, mind. I love you. You're going to do this now. Think about this word. And then you listen, chant your mantra, listen, or your word, whatever it is, and then listen for the sound current. Listen
Yeah.
for the stars that are singing in the universes, beyond the universes. That's where you want to go. You want to go beyond the universes, into the spiritual refined, where there are no words anymore. And you can hit a place that is so silent and so still that you know you are the universe.
Yeah. The beginning of creation.
Yes, you got it. You got it exactly. You can go to the very edge of creation. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad you actually mentioned that everybody should have their own word, because
Mm.
a lot of people are trying to say, you need to do it this way. This is the way that it works. And like you say, a lot of people don't resonate with it. I mean,
Right.
when you mentioned the word that works for you, I felt my body going in a bit of a strange altered state for a while. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Haven't had that experience before.
Mm.
But yeah, it's like doesn't really work. But I know I heard, I can't remember who was, it was many years ago. Somebody put in charge of the Buddhist monks. They had their different monasteries, and each group of monks was given a different word to meditate on. So some would meditate on peace, some would meditate on love, or a different word, but their vibration was also different.
Mhm.
They actually presented in a different way. If you had to maybe freeze the water, you'd be able to see the different structure of what that word represented. And
Mm.
so they each had their own kind of magic power, one could say.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. And I think it's so important because everyone has their own way of doing things. They have their own history, their own unique blueprint, or yeah, individual way of doing it. So how would somebody know what that word is for them? Was it just a matter of feeling it or listening to certain frequencies?
That's a great question. I think you play with it. I think you play with it. Like you said, I don't know which mantra it was, if I said the nigh hue or the hue for you, and you felt
The
some
hue, the hue.
hue is my favorite. Yeah.
I'm feeling it again.
Hue is, now I am too. Now it's moving me almost to tears. It's just such a, I mean, there's no words. So that's it. When you find something that does that for you and you go, I don't know what it, you don't have to know, you don't have to analyze it. That kind of gets in the way. I was just telling somebody yesterday, he was asking me about some experience. I'm like, don't analyze it. You don't, because this is the realm where there is no thought again. So if you start to think, it'll bring you down. It'll bring you into the lower levels. It's not bad. I don't mean bring you down. I mean,
Yeah.
it'll take you out of the spiritual levels, right? And this is where we want to go. Even if you can only just taste it for a moment, it's wonderful and it'll change your life forever.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And you don't go back. You wouldn't want to. So you find that like it's done for you, it moves you some way. And it might not move you forever, but for the time that it does, you can use that mantra, that word, that sound, and practice it silently or out loud, and then listen, and then listen. Then if your mind comes back in, chant it again, and then listen. Because it's in that still point that we are really transported.
Yeah. Yeah. I find it so interesting that people are so busy trying to be entertained on the outside. And I think there's so much more fun on the inside.
I'm with you. I'm with
How do
you.
you explain that to people?
But we are, I've been thinking about that lately because I've been thinking about, I spent a lot of time on the inner level in my life here, but we are human. And so, and we do have this human existence for some reason. And so we get to enjoy this here too. We
Yeah.
can enjoy it more, in my experience, when we have that connection with spirit and we're walking around in a field of compassion and love. Then this everyday world that we're in, it becomes more fun, more rich, more, because it overflows and then we share it, right? We share it. And when you have those moments with people where you are just shared, like we are right now, uh, we, I just don't know anything better. It's like a symphony. Like your song, the soul of your song, and the sound of your soul and the sound of my soul, we come together in this harmony. And it's a fun way to live life as on the human level.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, I think it's a lot of it's to do with being able to root your spirit into the physical so that you can create and do whatever you want with it. If you don't bring that in, you're living half a life, in my opinion.
I agree. I agree. I agree. It seems empty to me. Or but everybody is where they're at, and we're having
Yep.
this discussion, and there's, I'm sure, many of your listeners that are like, yes, more kindred spirits. I know exactly what you're talking about, or, oh, that's interesting. Let me try that, and we have these discussions and it clicks off new ideas and we find each other in community and we find kindred spirits and we share this whatever tradition we come from. It doesn't matter what but when our soul speaks to another soul, it's magic, isn't it?
Yep. And yeah, and I suppose for men it might be sharing what happened with soccer today, and they feel connected. I was driving past. I've just moved to the Netherlands. I was driving past the river, and there were all these men fishing, but they're all
Hmm.
about 2 cars apart and all minding their own business. And I thought this is so cute. You just have their own little spot along the river, and just knowing that their friends over there, they won't talk to them, but they know they're there.
Oh,
Anyway,
wow.
that's being human, right? It's everybody's got their thing.
It's all got
Yeah.
our thing. And this teacher I've had for so long, John Roger, he would say it's all ham and eggs, ham and eggs. And what he was saying was, over here I'm talking about ham and eggs, and over here our souls are communing. And it's nice to be aware of both, right? That
Yep.
the fishing,
Yeah.
and the community of fishermen, even though they're two car apart, and then this the beauty of the river and the fish and the peace that they must fishing is peaceful. The peace
Yeah.
they must feel out there.
Yeah. And just enjoying being present. Yeah.
Yes.
That is a form of meditation, right? I think it doesn't matter what you do it properly. Be in it. Not just do it for the sake of doing it so you can move on to the next thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No matter
Yes.
what that is. Yeah.
And although I
So
do feel like moving on to the next thing when I'm like playing with my bank accounts and stuff. I'm like, I want to move to the next thing. Right? I want to get out of the computer and go for a walk. So there's that too. There's that
yeah.
too. But I have had moments when I've been completely immersed in that level and present, and it goes like time stands still
Yeah. Yeah.
when I'm not judging it.
No.
That's that's the key.
Well, it's the left and the right brain hemispheres coming together instead of, I think I
Mm,
call the left brain the ego mind.
mm,
Instead of the ego just, wanting more, always seeking, judging, lacking security, it's overtakes it. And instead of trying to subdue the ego, raise the creative mind. And that way you lower that intensity of the ego mind and you calm it down. And I think it's like you said earlier, a lot of people try and calm it down by telling it to calm down. That's never going to happen, especially when men say to women, don't worry about it. I often say, well, when did that work?
right. Right.
Which, it's like saying, don't think of a pink elephant. And whatever you do, don't think of its cute little eyes.
Oh my gosh. I'll be
It's
thinking of that
cute.
after this podcast. Well, I
Yeah,
think you've really hit on another level of where we can master ourselves. And I think that ego part, it doesn't need to be suppressed, but it does need to be nurtured.
yeah,
So I think about nurturing it and bringing their comfort to any part like that.
yeah,
But I also think it's really important to listen to it because it
yeah,
can cause all kinds of havoc if I'm
yeah,
ignoring it or if I'm trying to tamp it down somehow.
yeah,
But rather to just listen. What are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to tell me? What do you need? Because it's probably needing something, right? Like a little kid that's crying and they're not crying just to cry. They need something. They need something. It's sometimes hard to know if they're not at the verbal level what they're needing. It's kind of like that with the ego. Sometimes
yeah,
it takes a couple, 3 days. It's like, what are you needing? What do you need? I'll give
yeah.
it to you. If it's not going to hurt others or me, I am here to nurture you. What are you needing? And sometimes it doesn't seem to know itself what it's needing.
I
But
think you're spot on there because a lot of the time it's just the validation and spending the time listening and saying, well, I am here. Somebody is listening. Instead of trying to keep yourself busy and watching TV or working or whatever the thing is that people try and keep busy with, is just to take the time to go in and listen, like you've been saying, and not just listen to yourself, besides listening to the universe and hearing for other stuff being open, but actually just validating that the ego or the inner child within you also has unresolved issues or just needs some time. Just be there. Somebody be there. Be there, hear me. And then it goes away. It keeps quiet.
it's so important. And if we're talking about going back to spiritual science, that's really part of a spiritual scientist or just self-mastery
Yeah.
is learning how to work with yourself like that
Yeah.
and being really tender and nurturing with all parts of our not that happy with either.
Yeah.
It's okay to go, what was I had something this morning that was a revelation that I looked at and I went, yeah, I don't like that about myself. Wait a minute. Something I do. I can't read. Well, the good news is I can't remember it because I immediately went, what do you need? Why are you behaving? It was a behavior, right? It was some kind of behavior, some kind of like impatience, nervousness, not anxiety, but a little anxious, edgy thing. And it was kind of like that. And I bumped up on it and I went, what are you needing? What are you needing? What is this? Why are you doing this? How long have you been doing this, by the way? It's like, oh, almost your whole life. Okay. Well, why? What do you need? You need something. And I don't remember what that exact thing was because I heard its voice, I heard what it needed, and I gave it the acknowledgement, like you're saying, the acknowledgement. Oh,
Yeah.
that's why you do that. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. It's coming back to me now. It was like it hadn't been heard. It hadn't, this part of me, part of my consciousness, probably right beneath the conscious, probably in the unconscious. It just hadn't I had been ignoring it, overriding it. And and I went, okay, yeah, I recognize you. I got you. I got you. I got you.
Yeah.
And I
That's
couldn't
amazing.
remember it just now because
Yeah.
it's satisfied, right?
Yeah.
For today, it might come back,
Yeah.
but now I know what this part is. And if you go in psychological terms, who knows what happened? Somehow growing up, it got split off in its own little island, or it got rejected by my mother, probably. And
Yeah.
it got like put in a box, and it's been trying to get my attention ever
Yeah.
since. It was a big revelation. But that's how I worked with it, and it's quiet now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of the time, if somebody's done you wrong, if all people are looking for is closure, because you can't take away the past, you can't undo what happened. But if they just said, I'm sorry, or I see how that hurt you, that's all you're needing. And they may never say it because maybe they don't even remember, or maybe they're no longer around. So you're carrying it with you everywhere you go instead of just acknowledging the pain, and then it's gone.
And it's gone. Yeah. It's beautiful healing
Yeah.
that we can do for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if the medium is using compassion to heal physical ailments,
Mhm.
because I do believe that all disease comes from emotional pain,
Mhm.
uh, then it's so simple,
Mhm.
but yet we don't do it.
Well, there's not a lot of people I'm with you. I agree with that. And even accidents.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so we have our work cut out for us, don't we, in this life?
That's fun.
And those of us that choose to grow in that realm, we really get somewhere. We really do heal. We
Yeah.
really do. And then we can share it with others and we really do heal. And you heal one thing and another thing comes up. But I've noticed that over my life, it's less and less.
Yeah.
It's less and less. I'm more and more free of whatever I came here for to heal, which I've heard some other teachers I studied with at the University of Santa Monica. They do a degree in spiritual psychology, and they would say 50%, Ron and Mary Hulnick, that 50% of what we're here for is to heal. And I think that gets whittled down actually over time if you choose to have that kind. It's not easy, right? Because if you're gonna heal something painful, you get to look at the pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there is grace, There is grace in that field of compassion and love. And sometimes we don't have to slog through every painful thing. We don't have to slog through every single one. But we have to slog, in my life, I've had to slog through quite a few of them, refeel them, and then, like I just told you, I healed that one thing this
Yeah.
morning. And whew, but it's less and less. It's less and less as I get older, as I've been on this journey. I mean, maybe I'm the slow learner. This is,
No, I don't think so. I think if you, I mean, initially you start healing past stuff, but then you start realizing it's not just yours. There's ancestral trauma. Then you realize there's generational, there's societal, there's past lives, there's wars, there's all sorts of stuff that's been going on. I know I read the story of Dr. Hugh Lin from who practices Ho'oponopono, and he's able to heal. Um, he healed an entire psychiatric ward just by saying, "I love you, please forgive me, I'm sorry, thank you." And he never even met a single patient. But anyway, that was besides the point. Nowadays, he doesn't want to meet anybody because every time he comes across someone, it creates karma. So if he's on a road, he has to apologize to the road for traveling on it because
he
it
sounds
gets
like
to
our
a point,
Jane.
it just doesn't stop.
Well, we do have hope. I wouldn't take it that far,
No,
although I'm
I
sure
wouldn't either.
he's a great healer. But there's called the cities. Do you know
Yeah,
about this?
yeah.
So for your listeners that don't, there's gifts of the meditator. There's gifts. So and that's real. The longer you practice spiritual practices, whatever they are, whatever's right for you, there's many gifts that come along with it. Many. So, I mean, staying in a field of constant forgiveness would be amazing, or constant acceptance, even stronger. I don't think I'd want to walk around apologizing to everything. But that'd be a lot of work.
Well, if it becomes a way of life, it's as you say, if you wake up, if you realize you're experiencing something that's that's out of alignment, you immediately bring to your awareness that it's out of alignment, and then you do some self-inquiry and you forgive it, and that becomes second nature. I, I,
Yes.
I suppose if that's what he has been doing all this time, then that is just second nature for him. That's just how he lives his day.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
Powerful. Powerful.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So where can people get hold of you?
Oh, um, well, so I'm just launching a program. It's called Soul and Spirit Daily Spiritual Practices. And what I've done is I've curated all from different faith traditions, 5 daily spiritual practices. So if you're wondering where to start, or if you just want to deepen your connection with spirit, you could subscribe to my program, and every day you're delivered an invocation, a chant from one of the sacred sounds, guided meditation, inspirational teaching from one of the great spiritual masters throughout history, and then I do an affirmation based on that teaching. And the meditation is kind of based on that teaching. It's 5 to 7 minutes, and there's a beautiful energy with it. And you just can listen to it, find the connection through it. So that's one way. And then every week for the subscribers, I'm doing a live video so you can ask questions or share, and it's just being launched. It's not even really launched yet, but it'll be launched this week. So by the time they're hearing this, it'll be available. So it's soulandspirit.net. And if you go there, they'll find um, the place to click.
Awesome.
So
That sounds
I'm
wonderful.
excited about it. I had so many people ask me over the years to meditate with them, and I thought, well, I don't think that's really what you're asking. I think you're really, because the meditation is a great start as a spiritual scientist, as a spiritual warrior, but I think you're really asking for a connection to spirit, and that can happen many ways. So I'll put this together, and that's how I put it together from just people
Yeah,
asking me all the time. Yeah.
yeah. And from there, it can grow into other things as well. As people start to ask questions or want to know more. Yeah, I like that. So, I know the tradition. So, what in traditions does it incorporate? Is it? I'm going to assume it would be a bit of Sufi,
Bit of
maybe.
Sufi. I'm probably closest to a Sufi in my traditions, and I was just so lucky to live next to a great Sufi teacher. And then this teacher I studied with for about 50 years, John Roger, a lot of what he did was kind of the Sufi. And um, but there's some Christianity in my daily practices too, just going back into the sacred scriptures and looking for what's beautiful there. But also some Hindu because I use some of the Hindu mantras in the chanting. Um, so I guess I'm the curator of a few different traditions.
Nice.
Yeah, but they all come to the heart. They all come to the love in the heart
Yeah,
as the spiritual path. It's really
yeah,
every spiritual path, every tradition is really the path of loving,
yeah,
because we're all created out of love. When you go to the edge of creation, what what's there?
yeah,
It's love.
yeah.
It's love.
Yeah, well, it's like they say a picture paints a thousand words. Every person would have an experience of something and it would be explained in their way. It doesn't mean their way is the only way. It just means it's through their eyes.
I think that the way is inside each one of us for us to
Yeah,
discover
yeah,
individually. And that's going to be a little different from every person, but then we can come together and share like we have today.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's beautiful. So, Katherine, do you have a final message for our viewers before we go?
Oh, um, whoever you are out there, I love you. Thank you for listening. And and thank you, Natasha. This has been beautiful.
You are welcome, and thank you for sharing. I absolutely loved chatting with you.
This was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Always fun.
Really.
Always fun. Thank you. All right. Enjoy your
Blessings
day.
to you on your journy.
Yeah, you
You're a
too.
spiritual warrior. Woo.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. Bye. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe to the channel below. It helps YouTube to send you more content like this, and you'll be the first to know when a new video is released. To watch my most recent uploads, click on the cards above.